Are JRPGs, or Japanese role-playing games to be unbeknownst, a classic genre that spanned across decades and generations of consoles. From the original incredibly influential Dragon Quest, all the way up to the modern day with Dragon Quest. I swear there's more JRPGs out there. This genre has captured the hearts of many with their rich worlds, detailed stories, and fleshed out characters, myself included. Of course, part of the reason it can be so content-filled is because of some of the biggest barriers of entry to the genre. They're primarily text-based, so a lot of reading is involved, and gamers hate reading. They can be grindy and tedious at times, fighting weak enemies over and over again just to get a single measly level up or item, which culminates in them often being very long games. Thus, they require a huge time sink and a lot of commitment if you want to get through just one of them. But on the flip side of this, they can also be some of the most rewarding games to really sink your time into, and many of the most iconic stories in games ever are JRPGs. This year, while keeping myself busy with YouTube videos, I've tried to go back to gaming in my spare off time just as a hobby. I've been slowly working my way through my giant game backlog, and I've really been enjoying it. And at the top of that list of unfinished games throughout the years, and probably the most pertinent to me in this video of course, is one of the most stylish JRPGs both visually and audibly, one of the most iconic in recent years, and as I mentioned before, very long. Of course, I am talking about Persona 5 Royal, the 5th edition in a spin-off to a long-running JRPG series that has now become more popular than the original series it was spinning off of, and the enhanced version of that 5th edition with even more content at that. A bit confusing, I know. This game stole the hearts of many when it came out in 2016 and propelled the franchise and genre to a much wider audience. After playing Persona 5 myself, I can now fully and definitively say that it is one of my favorite games of all time. Oh yeah, did I mention that it took me half a decade to finish it? Whoa, you're probably thinking, 5 years, that's a really long time, what were you doing, do I just suck at the game? Well, only partly, I'll admit. So let me talk about how I got into this game and why it took me so long to beat it. I had a bit of a rocky history with it. Also, keep in mind I'll probably mention some spoilery stuff in here, so if you do care about that, please be advised. I first found out about Persona 5 around the time it came out because a friend of mine was raving about how much he enjoyed it. So I looked into it, tried watching a Let's Play, and decided it wasn't really for me. It seemed a bit too edgy, and I was just like, why does the main guy look like a fish? What's wrong with his eyes? Then I started seeing some of those original memes that were circulating around online. The dancing game came out, and I saw the opening animations, thought they looked pretty neat, listened to some of the music. Then, by the end of 2018, Joker was revealed to be the first DLC character for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. By this point, over the course of a year or two, my opinion had flipped. I had gradually grown an interest in playing it. I mean, it was a monster collecting game that takes place in Tokyo, right? I'm a big fan of Pokemon and Tokyo, so it seemed inevitable that it would eventually hook me. But it was only on the PlayStation. And being a Nintendo fan, I didn't own one. That was until New Year of 2019. With some sales going on, I decided to buy a PS4 for cheap, and I got Persona 5 with it. I started the game, and honestly got kind of filtered by it. Aside from Pokemon, I'd never really played a JRPG, so I wasn't expecting it to be so text-heavy with a long introduction. Lots of complicated mechanics like fusing personas, life sim stuff, social skill specking, and time management. It was all a bit much. Granted, I'd probably say Persona 5 is one of the better games to act as a gateway to the JRPG genre, but I probably just wasn't really ready at the time. I wasn't really fond of a lot of the characters, and I was frankly flat out bad at the game. So after getting through Kamoshida's palace, I stopped playing. I could tell that if I kept playing, I would probably enjoy it, but I also knew it could be a very addicting game, so I stopped myself before I reached that point of no return. Flash forward to about 2 years later. It was now early 2021. I was now in university and had moved to a new city by myself. One day I was at the shops with one of my friends, and we were looking at the cheap pre-owned games. One of them happened to be Persona 5. I was explaining it to him, and as I was doing so, I found myself looking back on it more fondly. I did enjoy a lot about the game, but I realised now that I probably just wasn't ready for it. So as he bought the game for himself, I decided to go back and continue my save by playing alongside him. This time, I got much further into the game and I was enjoying it a lot more. My friend didn't really like the game that much in the end, since he's not a big anime fan, and I don't think JRPGs were quite his thing, but I continued regardless. It was around the beginning of Futaba's Palace, the fourth one in the game, where I just fell off from playing. It was probably a mix of a few different reasons why I stopped. I think that's around the point where there's more enemies that aren't just straightforward with their weaknesses. I was getting busy with uni starting back up again. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the palace, and I was probably a bit burnt out on playing through the game so much. It is big after all, so I took another long hiatus from Persona 5. I then decided that I knew I wanted to play the game and finish it, but it was more of a pipe dream than anything, and I told my original friend who was into it that I'd just wait for a Switch port that seemed like it would drop at any point and play it that way, since that's my preferred way of playing games. Surprise, surprise, it took almost another 2 years for that Switch port to arrive. It wasn't until Christmas of 2022, right after I had graduated university, when I finally got Persona 5 Royal on the Switch. So I'd have to start over again, and there was even more content to tackle. But this time, I was ready, excited, had more experience, and determined to finish it. And I certainly sunk my teeth into it. I beat Kamoshida's Palace on the first day of getting the game, and with the Switch's portability, I took it everywhere. I was playing it each night in bed, slowly making progress. I even took it camping. I played it non-stop until I had to move out of my uni accommodation, start a new job, and furnish my new place, so my life got a bit busy. I was about 60 hours into the game at this point and was at Sai's Palace, so I decided to take a little break from the game so I could readjust to how my life was changing, and before I knew it, that break extended into weeks, then months, and then almost a whole year. Every time I saw the game on my shelf, I got guilty about not playing it. But the longer time went on, the more daunting it became to go back to it. I was so scared that I was just at a too complex part of the game that late in, and that I wouldn't be able to simply jump back into it, so I just left it. Then, as the new year came around, I finally worked up the courage to go back to it, and finally had a good life-game balance with it. I would play it in the evenings when I'd come home after work, and I gradually worked my way through it over the course of a few months. And finally, in April, I finished the game. The credits were rolling. Over 5 years since I first bought it, with just over 110 hours clocked into my save, I had finally finished Persona 5 Royal and gotten the true ending. Do I regret not finishing it sooner? Well, kind of. Having it weigh on my mind for so long definitely was draining, but part of me appreciates I had the game be a part of my life for so long, and I'm glad I was able to be patient with it. After all, the game constantly says, take your time, and I took that very literally. As I came back to it over the years, I came to appreciate it more and more every time I returned. It always stuck with me, and as I grew as a person and in my real life, I also grew to love it more. Since starting it in 2019, I had gotten much more into anime, had the patience for longer JRPGs, and a love for the depth they can have. My music taste evolved from being basically non-existent as a teenager to becoming a huge fan of jazz and J-pop. And I had become a huge Lupin the Third fan, and had read the original Arsène Lupin stories by Maurice Leblanc, which the game takes so much inspiration from. I was able to spot so many details I wouldn't have before if I had only played the game back in 2019. The team at Atlus clearly put so much love and passion into every little spot of Tokyo. One of the things that drew me to the game originally was the setting of Tokyo. I loved traveling to Japan and had just been prior to originally getting the game, so I was excited to recognize some of the locations like Shibuya and Shinjuku. Since 2019 though, I had learned so much more about Japan and Tokyo, and in late 2023, after doing my big month-long Japan trip, I was able to recognize so much more of the in-game world down to the little details because I'd probably walked through them, coincidentally, not aware that many of them were in the game. I felt like I was growing alongside the game, uncovering lots of secrets and influences behind it independent of the game in my own time, which just made it that much more rewarding of an experience. At first, I didn't really care too much about the characters, but like the gameplay, they stuck with me and ended up being very memorable. I loved to learn about them through their social links and use them as a vessel to explore the city I cared so much about. It was all such a great experience, and I got thoroughly immersed. The gameplay loop is so addicting, but also satisfying when you set up excellent baton pass changes, bring in and build the perfect personas, grow your party, try to find all the secrets, and squeeze as much as you can out of the life sim aspects before the game ends. Despite being over 100 hours long, it's something that almost doesn't feel long enough. I wanted to keep being in this world and spending time with it. During the White Day event, when you see the Tokyo skyline at night during your date, I actually started crying. I knew that the game was in its epilogue, I had done the long main story and finished the extra third semester that was the emotional peak of the game, and I knew that I didn't have long left. I was just overwhelmed by how much I loved the game, the world, and of course Tokyo, and I didn't want it to end. Then, as the credits rolled with Hoshi Tobokurato playing, I was sad, but ultimately really satisfied and happy that I was able to experience such an incredible game. So, I didn't want to leave the world of Persona 5 behind, and luckily for me, I didn't have to. Not only does the game encourage repeat playthroughs of New Game Plus, and how difficult it can be to do everything on your first playthrough, after all, I didn't finish some key social links, but I wasn't quite ready to jump straight back into another 100-hour campaign, so instead I looked to the expanded universe and played Persona 5 Tactica. I like strategy games and was a fan of the art style, so I was eager to jump in and I tore through it. I binge played most of it in May while I was visiting my parents and didn't want to do anything aside from play it. Yes, the game doesn't focus on the Phantom Thieves that much, but instead highlights the new characters Toshiro and Eri. However, I really liked these characters a lot and felt they had good chemistry for all the others. Toshiro especially has become one of my favourite characters since he's practically the protagonist of this whole 30-hour game, so he gets a lot of time to be developed. His backstory was really tragic, but I was happy to see in the end that he would hopefully grow, and it also brought a tear to my eye. I'm a crybaby, okay? At anime and games and stuff. The only bad things I would say about the game is that the final kingdom just felt like extra padding, since it's basically just a boss rush of earlier bosses, and I wasn't enjoying it too much. I just wanted to get to the end and see the story I cared so much about reach its conclusion. There's also Persona 5 Strikers, the proper sequel to the original game, which I still need to play, but I'm willing to give that a bit more time until I'm really missing the Phantom Thieves and need my fix. Plus there's the other games in the Persona series. I have Persona 4 Golden on both Steam and my Switch, and played a little bit of it back in 2020, but I'm excited to properly get into it now that I've finished 5. And there's the recent remake of Persona 3, which I'd love to eventually play, but like 5, I'm waiting for a Switch port in the future. Or Switch 2 port, if that's a thing and happens. Now that I've finally finished Persona 5, I've become that friend that originally recommended the game to me. I can't stop gushing about it and telling others how much I love it. My friend Steph is currently playing through the game with the encouragement of both me and another friend, but she's never really played JRPGs and was struggling a bit. Well, I say a bit, but we were in shock to see the state she was in with the game, so she's being tutored by our friend and will probably have a good time with it. Overall, I'm really happy I was finally able to get Persona 5 under my belt. I'm no longer one of the classic Persona fan who has never played any of the games that people joke about. It opened up the floodgates to a lot more games for me and motivated me to play more and go back to games that had also been sitting in my backlog for years. Now with more experience and patience, I was able to properly finish them. Now I get to join the legions of people forever waiting for a Persona 6. And if you haven't played this game, please do. Just be aware that it is an incredibly long, albeit simultaneously incredibly rewarding game, and I doubt you'll regret at least trying it. Hello, thank you for watching this video. Apologies it took so long to come out. I had a bit of a burnout period with changes at IRL work and stuff like that, but I'm looking forward to getting back into video making proper. After this one, I have a few big ideas in mind for the rest of the year, so please do stick around for that, and I hopefully won't be as long with the next one. Oh, and in case you're wondering, my favorite characters in Persona 5 were Makoto and Akechi. They're the best, simply. So yes, thank you for watching, and I will see you all on the next video. Bye bye!